right, good day, good morning, good evening. My name is Craig, and I just want to share with you another installment of the digital twin space that we've found to be immensely valuable for our clients. And this is probably more of a little bit of an intro into that space, with a very simple, well-known case study to talk around some of the important pieces. So let me just share my screen. And so the important thing to remember is that what we're trying to do is with system dynamics, and most businesses, which are business model level, strategy level, is you actually have competing objectives. And so you have different stakeholders and outcomes pulling in different directions. And the problem with traditional business architecture and strategy and all the rest of it is that a lot of, to take into account everyone's disparate objectives and all pulling different directions is actually quite a complex thing to do, considering the rule of nines, which means that humans can really only integrate a maximum of 9 bits of information at one point in time. For the geniuses, average is about 2 or 3. Think of Excel spreadsheets and intersections. So we need system dynamics, digital twin type technology in order to help us process all these intersection points. So once again, what you have is these types of models that allow us to balance multiple levers all one time and then see the impact on the system. And so what you've got on your screen now is a classic case of two competing objectives. One is economic benefit, which is profit. Fishing village needs to make money for people to survive. And the other one is we need to maintain fish stock sustainability objective. And so, whereas normal projects, and there's this fail fast mindset, learn fast, agile experiment. You can't really experiment too much in these types of environments in the actual environment because the consequences are catastrophic. You will deplete the fish stock, you will destroy forests, etc., etc. So you need to use these types of tools to just give you that big picture view and to be able to simulate it. Now remember, models are only as valuable as the people that have built them. And so there will always be some error, but there's lots of use in being able to think carefully through the implications and unintended consequences. So here's a classic case, and I'll quickly shift you through 3 models just to give you that perspective. And you can see here I've got a fish stock, which is really kind of set to the maximum of 4,000. I've run this simulation over 40 years, and ultimately the job is to maintain the fish stock so it's not depleted, and also try and issue as many licenses for fishing as I can without depleting that fish stock. Those are your 2 objectives. I'm going to run it here. And so you can see straight away that as I am releasing ships, 2 ships there going out. So basically here's the result. All in all, I've got 40 ships out over the 40 years. So 1 ship per year, basically. And I've depleted the stock. So over here, around about the 10-year mark, the fish stock begins to do a downward trend and continues on that trend. Now, there's a few things that you can try and do to prevent this from happening. So what happens if we reduce the fish catch? And you can see that'll buy us a little bit of time. Okay, but can you see my profit drops? Okay, so if I bring the fish catch down to 10, great. We've managed to extend that life cycle a bit longer than 40 years, but profitability has now dropped. So, let's bring this back up to 30, and you can kind of see that crash goes significantly further downwards. Well, what happens if we maybe reduce the number of, let's maybe increase this a little bit so that our profit increases, but now you can see same story is that I'm depleting. So no matter which way I try and run this, you can see it's very difficult for me to balance these 2 competing levers in the system. And so we have to design this model to be able to cater for that. And so I can experiment with it just this way, and you're seeing in real time as I'm able to sort of drag this back and forth to actually see, what's the impact on my fish stock, etc., etc. But that's not working because you can see no matter how I try and balance it, I'm going to get the same result. I'm not going to be able to balance the 2 correctly. so one of the techniques is with innovation, you affect time and space. So let's look at the time aspect, and maybe let's set a pause interval, and let's pause this after every 4 years. Okay, let's run it again. And so now what it's doing is every 4 years, we take stock, and we sort of see, okay, now we can sort of see there the curve begins to occur at the top here. And so now what this means is that fish stock's beginning to dwindle. What should I do? Now I've got a few levers here. So let's pull down, let's take one of those ships out of circulation and see what happens. No, still going down, but now the curve is actually a lot more severe. So let's maybe drop this down to 1, which is pretty null and void. So don't release any more ships, don't issue any more licenses. Can I recover? Okay, so basically stopping the ships going out to sea, and slowly my fish stock's beginning to recover. All right, and profitability is never quite what it used to be, but I kind of get to that point of 30 years, and I've done a bit of a turnaround, which now says, all right, I'm at this point. Let me see if I can start adding ships back in. We've added them back in. So you can see now I can sort of, if I improve my intervention frequency, I can actually get a better result. Okay, so that's one way that we could possibly do it, which means we need to write a policy or put technologies in place that would allow us to measure more often. And you'll see later in the automated one that if I do this every year, it's actually this would benefit across all parties, so that there's a high frequency. Well, do we have the capability to do that? That becomes an operating model, strategic decision for all parties. So what this software also allows you to do is basically run a bunch of tests on it. So I can talk about, well, in this particular payoff, I call it fish and chips. And what I want to do is I want to maximize my fish stock, and I give that a weight of 2 because it's more important to me than my ships at sea. Okay, and so I'm looking at the final value, but let's maybe look at it over an entire run, which may be a better one for us to work with. Okay, and so now what I want to do is I want to optimize, and I've got a few levers here. So I've got the normal catch per ship, which is that one. I've got purchasing of new ships, which is this one, and I've got moving ships out. Okay, back here. And I've got the moving of the ships out to harbor. So I've got those 3 levers to be able to work with. Let's see if this algorithm can help me with this process. So I'm going to run this. And so what we've actually got here is there's a score that it provides. And after running through, I can tell it to run thousands of these, by the way, and just gives it the extent to which I can move the levers. And so what we've got here is probably 29 ships, 2 going in, 2 going out. Well, it seems a bit counterintuitive, so we're not necessarily going to get the best profit there. So maybe there's something here that also comes out with the same score. I've got 30 per ship. There's 3.5 going in, 1.5 coming out. And so that might be an option for me to explore. Okay. And so what this allows us to do is just run through a variety of different Monte Carlo type simulations to be able to determine, okay, well, how many of these configurations can we have? If I had more levers, n to the power of n-1, you can see that you can have quite a lot of different, iterations that you could work through. And so what that's telling me is maybe I can intervene a little more along the way. But ultimately, I don't want to have to interfere with this model. I want to think through it with clients and say, well, okay, we kind of know there's something that we can work with here. How can we actually automate this? I don't want to actually have to interfere, pause, do those types of things. I want the model to automatically calibrate. And so what we've got here is a final version. And so what this one does is it's brought a few new extra things in here. So remember, we kind of just had the fish density affecting the maximum catch per ship, that sort of stuff. So what I've done is I've taken the sustainability maximum yield, which says anything over 50% of the fishery size means that you can now start catching from that thing, and therefore that'll dictate how much it is. Over the 50% will dictate how much you can actually take. So that means it gives you a quota and then changes the catch per ship over the life cycle of the actual fish stock. And similarly, if there's a trend that's occurring, and if we see that the trend is becoming negative, all right, as soon as that occurs, we want you to self-adjust and start to either take more ships out of the ocean and stop putting new ones in. So it automatically begins to work. And so what you see now is this sort of behavior. And so there you have it. It's automatically balanced. We've got a good profit line there. Right? We've got a good fish stock that now remains balanced, and we kind of get our ships to roughly about 20 or so, sort of bouncing around at that level. And that appears to be the balanced state. And this is what you're trying to do with these business models and system dynamics, is you're finding the balanced state between all of those competing objectives. So that's great. You know, what can we affect here? Well, let's maybe change the trend windows. What this is looking at in 5-year windows. Where's the trend going? But what happens if we reduce that and we bring it down to maybe 1 year? Okay. And so now higher frequency, we're affecting time. And now you can see something quite interesting happening here. So you can see that the fish stock is actually quite high. It's remained high. But the ships have actually reduced. Let me run this one so we've got another run to actually work with. Okay. And so the ships at sea has actually been reduced, but my profitability hasn't been significantly impacted. So that's first prize. So I'm actually maintaining the the fish stock, reducing the number of ships, but not necessarily affecting profitability, because I'm actually also affecting the amount of fish I can take per catch. So now there's a nice balance that's occurred here. Once again, now causes us to build processes, structures within the business that would allow us to now go and monitor the catch per ship, monitor and issue the number of licenses that are being issued and when they expire, being able to track the sustainable maximum yield. So now there's some sort of technologies and operating processes that need to be in place in order for us to do this. Now we can build a business model, the operating model associated to it. But you really need this level of detail in order for you to really understand your decisions and their impact on the system. This is a very, very entry-level example. So I can go build out the full operating model, the process and all this, and then also show, well, how do these processes all work together to achieve the outcome, et cetera, et cetera. And you can really take these models into thousands of variables territory. But this is really just to give you a quick little intro into creating that balanced model and the competing objectives, especially when it comes to systems thinking and looking at the system as a whole, and making one change over here is throwing a pebble into a pond. It's got these ripple effects that cascade and affect everything else in the system, and ultimately could have severe unintended consequences, which would affect your decision in the first place. So obviously, you know, I can, off the back of that, you know, I can look at the, let's just run this again. I can look at the CLD view, and that now I can actually start also, so what's the causal loop diagram? And I can begin to apply some of the archetypes of Peter Singer and looking at, well, which causal loop might we see occurring here? Are they reinforcing or balancing loops? What do they look like? Where's my intervention points to be able to work with? So all of this stuff is in here and creates a really, really powerful environment for us to be able to analyze and tweak policy and strategy accordingly. All right, short little intro into creating a balanced system. Hopefully it was useful to you. Start to think about not only how this can apply to competing objectives in this type of sustainability system, but think of it in your organization. All the different competing objectives you might have in your organization or across different agencies, across the government, let alone across country. Right? So you can see without automation, it becomes very, very difficult for you in a workshop environment or any other environment to be able to balance these competing objectives. So I'll catch you next time. Cheers.